Join me on the Titans of Industry podcast series as I continue my conversation with Samer Kassem, the CEO of Aspen Global in Mauritius. In the next episode, we discuss progress with implementing the government of Mauritius's plans to add a new pharmaceutical manufacturing pillar to their economy. Now, in terms of this plan, has Mauritius already begun implementing it? What has already been done, and what is the short to medium term sort of objective in terms of taking it forward?
I was asked to chair a committee between the private and the public sector, and the committee is represented by EDB, as I mentioned before, the Economic Development Board, a few ministries, and some of the local companies that are involved in the healthcare sector and the pharmaceutical sector. So now the purpose of the committee is to put actionable steps with timelines and recommendations and proposals that would go to the government for the government to consider and then put this into action. For me, Lenias, this is a great step because first it is connecting the private and the public in one room, and you're putting steps that are you have like in corporate, we all our actions, they would have timelines and owners and all of these things. So this is now being done, and sorry, I missed something, which is that the universities are also included. Like a couple of universities are included in this committee, which also help in what we discussed earlier around having programs at the universities that would make students that like when they graduate from these universities, they are already plug and play in working in the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm seeing more steps than ever to take this from theoretical interest or just throwing money at the problem to solve it, which it doesn't help in this situation. While I wouldn't say it doesn't help completely, it helps, but you need all the other ecosystem to work together to get this to work. So this is a very good step, I believe, and it is practical, and it has many people who are involved that are contributing to this initiative.
You mentioned the academic participation there, which I think is a very critical bridge, especially going forward in terms of how, having all of the elements that makes this industry sustainable and a pipeline of talent, a continuous sustainable pipeline of talent is very critical to that. And Africa does struggle quite a bit when it comes to having especially people skilled workforce in the pharmaceutical sector with the right exposure. So you mentioned earlier that developing that skilled pharmaceutical workforce and everything required to support that industry is a low-hanging fruit. Tell us a little bit more about some of the initiatives, what is happening, like what already exists that Mauritius can actually leverage on to invest more going forward in terms of the academic capabilities for training and developing a workforce?
Sure. From a university's perspective, Mauritius has good representation of African universities, and they have also university from Australia, among others. So they have a very good educational system. But I believe the development of the workforce would need a collaborative approach between the universities, as I mentioned earlier, and the companies, the private sector. What I see as a good experience that we have is the Aspen business case. When we started in Mauritius, I was working from a lobby for the first 3 months with no staff. And then when we started with 100% expats. So people from abroad coming to work with me to set up this business. And today I'm very proud that we're more than 70% Mauritians. And that took a bit of time. and training and on-the-job experience that led to having that development in the workforce. And also, Africa has a lot of talents, but they are abroad. So repatriating these talents to come to work back in Africa is important. So, and that's why when you create pillars, like new pillars for the economies, or companies like Aspen in a small country like Mauritius, and then we repatriated more than 25 people from abroad who were working in pharmaceutical or non-pharmaceutical companies that came back to work in Mauritius for the right opportunity. So Lenias, it is really a spiral effect, multiple positive waves that will get that. So where you can get professionals who are attracted to the opportunities in Mauritius or in Africa at large. Like today, Africa, back to the vaccine question. We import 99% of the vaccines of Africa. So only 1% is manufactured in the continent. So that picture has to change. And again, it's time for Africa, and now it is the right time to pull together, and whether it's the African Union or all the other initiatives that are happening, so will help in expediting the process. Again, in every problem there is an opportunity, and the pandemic came while it is very hard, and it is not something that we can look at it when thinking, oh, it is an opportunity. But for Africa, if we think of the continent at large, we can benefit from this in the long run.
No, absolutely. The pandemic has really put the feet of our leaders to the fire, like move. We need to do something about this now, yesterday, in fact. So it's great that the private sector really is stepping up and working with governments to make that happen, to transform that picture from 1% of vaccines needed in Africa to, being made on the continent, to the vision that the African Union has set, that by 2040, we need to have at least 60% of the needs, vaccination needs, being made domestically on the continent. So you guys have your work cut out for you. So it's great to see you're moving and running with the agenda. Now, in terms of the training, the workforce, repatriation, like you say, is part of the answer. Certainly, there's a lot of talent out there that you can tap into. But what about local training and exposure, making sure interns and graduates get the necessary practical experience that prepares them to go into the industry with hands-on experience? What is Aspen or planning to do in terms of facilitating that?
Yeah, from an overall plan in Africa, our group CEO has been very active in ensuring that this is high on his agenda and on the plans to upskill Africa in general, not only South Africa or one specific country. So there are still discussions, and the discussions are with the African Union and with different organizations. So this is ongoing. And as far as Mauritius is concerned, the discussion that we started between universities and the pharmaceutical companies is crucial, because and the universities were so accommodating, and they are so excited about the opportunity to incorporate the practical aspects in their programs. So this is like at the end of the day, like you start with a will, with an interest, with a vision, then you start moving into the practical steps. So that's from one side, the university and how they can incorporate and learn from the pharmaceutical industry or the healthcare industry what is really needed as practical skills that the students, when they graduate, they can start, and they do not need as I mentioned before, we needed a long time for Aspen to start using local talents, because you need to train them to also go up the ladder and move in that direction. So that is one side. The other side is we also hire fresh graduates, fresh from college, and sometimes interns, where they come to Aspen and they learn the practicalities of being in a global organization, which is different than being in a local organization or even a Pan-African organization, because you're working with people in the US, Australia, Latin America, different time zones, different cultures, different languages, and it requires a certain set of skills that you learn so that you adapt to that diversity. And companies like Aspen, and I hope that we will have more and more, because then we can share talents and we can help each other in repatriating African talent to the continent. So the more you have companies like that, the more this mission will expedite, which is upskilling the local talents, because Africa doesn't lack raw talent. It is just a matter of how there are so many good seeds, but you need to water the seeds so that you get a thriving plant, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think there is big opportunity to use these seeds, these talents that are in Africa.
Absolutely great potential in the youth resource that exists. I mean, most of Africa's population is very young. The majority of people in Africa are young, and youth unemployment is a big challenge. So obviously all of these initiatives are contributing to solving some of those challenges that countries are facing. So are you looking to set this up, this skills development as a sort of industry, academic collaboration, bringing in other companies? And do you already have a number of companies that are already on board to get that going?
In the committee that I mentioned earlier, where the different pharmaceutical companies and healthcare companies are meeting with different ministries and the universities, it is already on the agenda and it was discussed, and there was strong interest to act on it and to pursue that, which is enhancing the program. So it is already in motion. Now it's a matter of putting the teams together so that they start taking this into practical steps and not just theory, like, okay, it's always good to have people who graduate with practical experience and with certain skills that are needed in the work environment. That's all good and that's all theory. So what we're trying to do with that committee is move the theory to action, and then have timelines. And again, back to my comment, you cannot go from 1 to 100 or like run a marathon in one day after you decide. So it is a process. It requires a lot of patience and it requires commitment to the journey, because we can say that we don't have vaccines in Africa, and it is only 99% of our vaccines are imported from abroad, etc. But if we do not start the journey to do something about it, it is long. It's not like you will get that immediately, whether it's 2030, 2040, or 2060, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But the journey has to start. And that's what we started in Mauritius, is we started the dialogue. We're putting action steps that will connect the academics with the practical world, so that we ensure that we have graduates that are fit for what we need for this new pillar, as you described it earlier, in Mauritius and probably in Africa at large.
Certainly very exciting developments, I think, all over the continents, with countries and corporates really bringing different parts of the puzzle, of the solution that is needed for us to stop being so overly dependent on our medical products, not just vaccines, but in all other areas where we really are basically very much at the mercy of others in terms of access. Now, I was actually talking to the African Union envoy to the African Medicines Agency yesterday. And I just mentioned earlier that they just got ratification. So they have enough countries now who have signed the treaty and deposited the treaty instrument so that they can move from the political process to the operation process, where they can actually open the doors of the African Medicines Agency. So Michelle Sidibe was telling me that we are likely to see the African Medicines Agency begin its operation possibly within weeks, but certainly before the end of the year. How do you see the African Medicines Agency and, of course, the single African market under the African Continental Free Trade Area changing the game for companies like Aspen, but particularly for countries like Mauritius that are small but wants to contribute to the larger African agenda of self-sufficiency of medical products?
Yeah, again, in unity there is strength. And I feel that this initiative is starting to unite Africa, and not only this initiative. I think the pandemic made it clear that Africa needs a change, and the change started, I believe. So if you have the African Medicine Agency, which is a Pan-African entity that will start being operational as soon as you're saying, like in a couple of weeks. That's amazing, because what it does, it will hopefully not only unite, but start to put certain parameters in terms of the quality, the GMP aspects, the regulations aspects, the educational aspects, so that you have some elevated level in the different African countries, whether it's Mauritius or any other country, to have certain standards. And then, like the European Medicine Agency, where it is extremely trusted, and you look at what they say and what they approve, so that many countries would follow after the European Medicine Agency approve a certain drug or vaccine, and you name it. So I think we can that initiative will elevate the level of the different African markets, and hopefully the agency will thrive to be one of the reputable agencies in the world, so that when they approve something or certify something, it is trusted, and then it will help countries like Mauritius, who's smallish in the grand scheme of things, to, when they get approval from the African Medicine Agency, then they will have more of an endorsement than just the local health authorities.
But just, from your position as the CEO of a big multinational operating in Mauritius for so many years, what do you see as the biggest asset that Mauritius has to offer that makes it an attractive destination for investors who are interested in putting their money into this sector and supporting the government's agenda?
Sure. Again, it's a good question, Lenias. But obviously, you can see, I think, the scenery behind me. So, and aside from that, which is like that, Mauritius is an attractive location in terms of scenery and you name it, from a natural beauty here.
Yes.
There is much more to that. Like, there is the security aspects, which you have a country that is 100% safe and secure in terms of personal security, as you are here, and then you have the stability aspects. Like, even if you have opposition or the government, and the opposition changed the government, or government changed the opposition, whatever happens,
yes,
the agenda remains more or less the same in terms of foreign investments in Mauritius. Like, I've been in Mauritius for 15 years, and there were many governmental changes, and the views around foreign investments remain the same. So there is that's another angle that Mauritius is attractive, and also Mauritius has very good connections with Asia, particularly India, and it is close geographically to Africa. So that's also another advantage that Mauritius can benefit from.
Mm.
And then you have the business case that Aspen started in Mauritius, where you can really go global from Mauritius, and we are a living example of that, where we attracted talents and we managed to grow from zero to the size that we are today, which is a practical life example of attracting foreign investments that really worked. So that's my view. These are my views in a nutshell.
Yes, yes. No, it's, I mean, the ease of doing business is certainly very important. And it's where a lot of African countries really struggle. And of course, the stability of the policy environment, that investors are assured that the conditions under which they invest will remain the same and will not change, suddenly and deviating from what was agreed. But you mentioned a very important point about the security of the environment, because I mean, I am following this this project of establishing manufacturing sector across the continent, and you look at what is happening in Nigeria, in Mali, in Mozambique, the unrest, the civil unrest, and you have to wonder how that is going to affect our ability to attract the necessary investment to develop that infrastructure that we need to make this industry thrive and take off in a meaningful way. So we are coming to the end of our podcast, Samer. Do you have any closing remarks about the path forward, where you're at, and how you see this going forward, from the perspective of Mauritius, but also on a continental level, from just what you're observing as an expert in the industry?
Sure. I think now it's clearer than ever that we need to do things differently in Africa. So from a pharmaceutical perspective, and the pandemic showed that, and you can see it in numbers, you can see it in media, you can see it everywhere. So, and now it's about the governments reacting to that issue that we face in the past couple of years. And I'm seeing that the governments in general are reacting well, which is something that is a very good starting point.
Yes.
But I also do not want to get my hopes extremely high, because whatever Africa does, it needs to be long-term. Commitment should stay. That collaboration between the private and public sector should endure more than the pandemic, and should endure more than one election cycle, and it should continue to the future. The journey is steep, right? It's not an easy journey to say that I want to start a new pillar in the economy, and especially as complicated as pharmaceuticals. It's not like grocery stores where you can move product from point A to point B, and just you have completely different rules and regulations. Whereas the pharma industry is extremely regulated for a good reason, and it takes a lot of education and a lot of small steps. Back to what we discussed in the podcast, we need to manage the low-hanging fruits and then start evolving and going up the ladder. If that commitment continues and the collaboration continues, I really have high hopes. We have so many African talents that they are not put into use, or they are just leaving and benefiting other continents and other countries. So I don't have strong group identity and all Africans should remain in Africa and everything. Like, I'm all for cross-continental transfer of skills and all of that. However, for the right reasons. So we want people to if they leave, they are leaving for the right reasons, and if they stay, which this is what we want, for the right reason and the right environment. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic about what I've seen in the past few months, particularly some of the initiatives that are happening in Africa. And I'm also very optimistic to see someone like you, Lenias, taking the time and personally taking this to social media and to different titans of the industry and to different governments. And you mentioned that you were talking to the African Union. And so all of this is a good thing, and it happened for a reason. And I believe we're starting a very good journey. We just need to persevere. That's it from my side. I think the future is bright as long as we continue on that path.
That's a perfect place to end. You're cautiously optimistic. And of course, it's a long journey, like you say. So the question is, will governments make the long-term commitment that is necessary to see this through to the end? Samer Kassem, CEO of Aspen Global. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you on.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you very much, Lenias.
If you support our work, please do subscribe, like, and share our podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. So do please send in your comments and your feedback on some of the things that you'd like to hear us discuss on this podcast. Thank you for watching.